Hello and welcome. Tonight, we're not storming any beaches. We're not parachuting into the night sky. We're not even crawling through the mud on our bellies while someone shouts over artillery fire. No, tonight, we're simply marching into sleep, quietly, calmly, and very much with clean socks and dry blankets, which already puts us several steps ahead of the average soldier in 1943, because that's where we're headed. Back to the height of the Second World War. But not to the front lines of famous battles, not to the maps and medals, the generals and speeches. We're going to spend some time with someone less talked about, a face in a crowd, a cog in the war machine, someone not looking to be a hero, but just trying not to be yelled at during roll call. Now, before you get comfortable, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe if you like my content. Your support truly means a lot to me. Also, let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. I'm genuinely interested in knowing who is joining us from around the world. Tonight, we're slipping into the boots of a regular American GI during World War II. Just a normal day if such a thing existed. You're probably somewhere in Europe or the Pacific, but maybe not even overseas yet. Maybe you're still training stateside, learning how to march properly and make your bed with terrifying precision. Or maybe you're stationed on some tiny patch of foreign soil you couldn't point to on a map 6 months ago, where the food is bad and the water tastes like rust and the enemy is invisible most days, but still somehow always watching. The story of the war is full of grand arcs, the rise and fall of empires, the clash of ideologies, the signing of treaties and the redrawing of borders. But beneath all that, underneath the weight of history, were millions of ordinary Americans who found themselves in uniform, waking up every day into uncertainty, discomfort, and often complete absurdity. They didn't have TikTok or protein shakes or podcasts about resilience. They had M1 rifles, tin helmets, itchy wool, and a growing suspicion that the military was inventing new chores just to keep them too tired to complain. They weren't invincible. They weren't fearless. Most of them didn't even want to be there. They were scared, confused, hungry, cold, and often bored. This wasn't the war from the posters. This was the war from the ground level, where mud was a constant companion, socks were currency, and the smell of canned meat could end friendships. It's a world of hurry up and wait, of endless formations, of shouting sergeants and letters from home. A world where sleep was precious, showers were mythical, and food was something that came in a can and somehow always looked like beige pudding, no matter what the label said. And yet, through it all, the chaos, the noise, the bureaucracy, the lack of privacy, the aching feet, the rationed everything, they endured, sometimes with humor, sometimes with grit, often with neither, but they endured all the same. So tonight, we're going to walk in their boots, metaphorically of course. Your feet are warm and clean and definitely not blistered, so let's keep it that way. But we'll follow along quietly, imagining what it meant to wake up one day as a US soldier in the biggest war the world had ever seen, not as a legend, not as a statue waiting to be built, but as someone with sore shoulders and a terrible bunkmate who snores like a tank engine. You'll start in a cot that barely deserves the name, wrapped in a blanket that smells like every man who's used it before you. You'll try to brush your teeth with cold water and shave while someone's kicking the back of your knees to hurry up. You'll eat rations that promise to be nutritious, but don't promise much else. And you'll try to figure out what exactly your orders are, why you've been assigned to dig a ditch again, and whether anyone actually understands what's going on. We'll explore not just the battles, though there will be some, but the banal moments between, the waiting, the walking, the writing home, the wondering what's next. And as we go, you'll see why this life, the daily life of a World War II soldier, was not just hard, it was barely survivable. Not just because of the bullets, but because of the boredom, the discomfort, the uncertainty, and the sheer physical and emotional toll of living in a world built for war. You'll learn about their routines, their uniforms, their slang. You'll hear about their training, their fears, their distractions. You'll smell their coffee, burned, taste their food, tinny, feel their aches, constant. And you'll probably realize, very quickly, that you wouldn't last. Not even a little. You, with your functioning heating, and your noise-cancelling earbuds, and your anxiety when the coffee machine is broken. You'd cry before lunch. And that's okay, because that's the point. They weren't superhuman. But what they did waking up and doing it anyway, was extraordinary. So take a breath. Let the noise of the present fade, and let the distant rumble of army trucks and distant bugles settle into the background. Let's step back into the 1940s, into a world of canvas tents, gravel underfoot, and every sock in desperate need of a wash. But don't worry, we won't be marching far. We're here for rest, for calm, for a soft drift into dreams wrapped in khaki. Because sleep, after all, is something even soldiers needed and rarely got. Let's start then with how a typical day begins. The sun isn't even up yet. The air is cold, or maybe humid, depending on where you've been shipped. But one thing's certain, someone is already yelling. You're about to wake up. At war. You don't wake up in a US Army cot so much as you regain awareness of discomfort. There's no soft beep, no warm light gently rousing you. There's a bugle. Always the bugle. Or if you're especially unlucky, a sergeant with vocal cords carved from gravel shouting something patriotic and cruel before sunrise. Either way, it's early, it's dark. And whatever dream you were having, likely about dry socks or pie, dies the moment you open your eyes and remember where you are. It's 1943, you're stationed somewhere forgettable, a training camp in Louisiana, a muddy airfield in England, or a canvas tent on an island with more mosquitoes than soldiers. The ground under your cot, if you were lucky enough to get a cot, is always uneven, dirt if you're stateside, mud if you're not. Either way, it's cold, and somehow also damp. Always damp. The blanket you've been given smells like its last 3 owners, and that's being generous. Revel sounds loud and unapologetic. You sit up. Your back hurts, your legs are stiff, and your boots... Oh, right. Your boots are not where you left them. Someone tripped over them in the night, or maybe used them as a doorstop. You locate them eventually, one under your bunk, one outside the flap of the tent, inexplicably soggy. Outside, the camp is slowly shaking itself awake. The air smells like cold firewood, wet canvas, and desperation. You spot a private struggling to put his helmet on backward. Another soldier is trying to shave with a piece of cracked mirror and a razor that's seen better decades. Somewhere, a corporal is already yelling at nobody in particular, just to warm up his lungs. You try to shave too, because there's an inspection later, and nothing angers a sergeant faster than stubble. But the water's freezing, the soap's missing, and the blade bites your chin before you've finished half your face. That's fine. Just tilt your head slightly during inspection, and maybe no one will notice the gash. You wash your face with a rag. Your whole morning routine, such as it is, involves splashing your face with a few ounces of water, brushing your teeth with a stick of army-issued mint paste that tastes like chalk and regret, and giving up on the idea of feeling clean ever again. Now it's chow time. You and the rest of your unit shuffle toward the mess tent or field kitchen, if you're lucky. If you're not, it's K-rations again. Pre-packaged meals in cardboard boxes designed by someone who clearly never tasted food or experienced joy. The army says they're balanced. You say they're beige. In the mess tent, the line moves slowly. You get a tray that might once have been shiny. It still has some mysterious dents, and perhaps a chunk of yesterday's scrambled eggs. Speaking of eggs, today's breakfast is powdered, reconstituted with something that was probably water, heated in something that was probably a pot. The result is pale yellow and faintly smells of rubber. Alongside it, you're handed a scoop of greyish hash, a piece of white bread tougher than field canvas, and coffee that's hot, black, and mostly made of grit. You drink it anyway, because caffeine is sacred and there are no alternatives. Sometimes you get bacon, the kind of bacon that has lost the will to be bacon, but it crackles when you chew it, so it counts. If it's Sunday, maybe there's jam, maybe. On a good day, someone hands out oranges, but today is not a good day. You sit where you can, on crates, benches, the edge of a Jeep tire. There's no real small talk. No phones, no headphones, no scrollable distractions. Just the sounds of chewing, occasional coughing, and someone swearing softly because their boots still don't fit right. Most soldiers eat with mechanical speed, not because they're excited, but because they've learned food is temporary. You never know when someone will shout "gear up" and make you sprint across the compound. Many develop the habit of eating with their helmets nearby and their spoons tucked into a pocket. It's not paranoia, it's muscle memory. An amusing historical tidbit: many GIs reported that they ate so fast They had no idea what anything tasted like. Army food didn't inspire culinary critique. It just needed to be swallowed before it got cold, or before a fly beat you to it. Once breakfast ends, trays are dumped in a big metal barrel. Coffee cups are rinsed with lukewarm water that may have been used 10 times already. Someone's already started cleaning latrines. You try not to make eye contact. The guy on latrine duty looks like he's reconsidering all his life choices, starting with enlisting. Now it's time to get ready for the day, and that means getting dressed properly. Not just throwing on pants and hoping for the best. No, this is the army. You put on your uniform with a combination of speed and obsessive precision. Trousers tucked, boots laced tightly, shirt buttoned to the neck, belt on, helmet straight, jacket folded or worn, depending on the weather and the mood of the officer inspecting you. Next comes gear check. You make sure your pack is squared away, your rifle is clean, your canteen is filled, and your dog tags are around your neck. Somewhere, someone has already lost a sock. Another soldier is panicking because he can't find his entrenching tool. That's the tiny shovel every soldier carries, for digging holes, trenches, or occasionally sitting on when everything else is wet. Then comes the morning inspection. Everyone lines up, boots aligned, eyes forward, hands at your sides. The officer or sergeant walks past, silently judging. If you're lucky, he says nothing. If you're not, he points out the stain on your jacket, the tear on your pack, or the smudge of shaving cream still on your chin. You say nothing. You blink once. You wait. Once inspection ends, there's usually a briefing. You gather in a huddle or under a tarp or near the back of a truck while someone outlines the day's plan, which usually goes something like drill, 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 march here, run there, practice digging, shooting, hiding, and maybe, just maybe, cleaning everything again after you've made it dirty. That's army life. Wake up too early, eat too fast, move too often, carry too much, sleep too little, and still, they did it. Thousands of young Americans woke up every day in places they couldn't pronounce, surrounded by people they barely knew, wearing uniforms that didn't quite fit, to fight in a war they barely understood. You, on the other hand, are warm, safe. You're not holding a mess tin or hoping the tent doesn't leak. You've got a pillow, maybe even two. So let that reveille fade now. Let the morning roll call drift into the distance, because next, we'll see what happens after breakfast. The drills, the yelling, the synchronized stomping of feet through mud that never ends. But don't worry, you won't have to march, just float. The thing about military training is that it doesn't wait for your legs to wake up, or for your breakfast to settle, or for your soul to re-enter your body. It begins exactly when it feels like it, usually right after morning chow, and always at the precise moment when you finally manage to dry your socks halfway. You blink, and suddenly someone's shouting your name, your unit, your life into motion. It's time to drill. Now, if you're picturing a few light stretches and maybe some motivational calisthenics set to jaunty music, forget it. This is the US Army in the 1940s. There is no music. There is only marching, yelling, and the kind of physical exertion that turns socks into sponges and shoulders into stone. You form up with your unit, or attempt to. The lines are never quite straight. The guy to your left is always 2 inches too far, and someone's already tripping over their own rifle strap. It's early, cold, and the field where you're drilling is doing an excellent impression of a swamp. Your sergeant steps forward. He looks like he hasn't smiled since 1923, and may not start today. He's already holding a clipboard. That clipboard has seen things. Your name is on it. That can't be good. The first command hits the air like a slap. Fall in, followed by a torrent of instructions you're expected to follow with absolute precision and no thinking whatsoever. You snap to attention. Feet together, eyes forward, back straight, rifle held just so. And then, you wait. Standing still in formation is its own special kind of misery. Your feet hurt, your fingers itch. Your helmet tilts slightly to the left no matter what you do. You hear the quiet shuffle of boots on wet grass, the occasional cough, someone whispering too loudly and instantly regretting it. Then without warning, forward, march, and you're moving. Not gracefully, not comfortably, just in motion. One foot in front of the other, synchronized with the men around you, arms swinging just right, rifle bouncing slightly with each step. It's a strange kind of ballet. minus any music or joy or applause. Marching seems simple until you do it for an hour straight, in boots that were broken in by your older brother's friend's cousin, who was discharged with trench foot, across fields that have not seen a patch of dry earth since last summer, through puddles that swallow your ankles and mock your hopes, and with a rifle that seems to gain 5 pounds every 5 minutes. Training doesn't care about the weather. It could be raining sideways, the mud could be halfway to your knees, and your sergeant would still be hollering about tight lines and heel to toe. The United States military in 1943 was powered by coffee, grit, and an unshakable belief that anything could be fixed by marching. Drills cycle through relentlessly. Today, it's close order formation practice, alternating with calisthenics, and something ominously called bayonet conditioning. The push-ups start easy, then come the sit-ups, then the jumping jacks, then the mysterious and dreadful mountain climbers, which mostly just involve making alarming noises in the mud, while your sergeant times you with the intensity of a man watching a horse race. By now your uniform is soaked, your boots are a swampy mystery, your legs are beginning to question your loyalty, but still, the whistle blows. Again! In some training camps, like Camp Toccoa in Georgia or Fort Benning, soldiers were expected to march up to 25 miles a day in full gear, through forests, across rivers, up hills that felt like mountains, and down paths slick with frost, mud, or something suspiciously gooey that no one wants to talk about. The mud gets into everything, your boots, your sleeves, your thoughts. It finds the seams of your clothes, the corners of your tent, the folds of your soul. You dream in mud now, but even worse than the mud is the sound. Everyone's yelling. Sergeants yell instructions, officers yell at sergeants, privates yell to cover their panic. The guy from Ohio yells because he's from Ohio and he believes it builds morale. No one is quiet. Silence is suspicious. If you're not shouting, you must be plotting. Then comes weapons drill. You hold your rifle at various angles, shoulder arms, present arms, port arms, whatever the manual demands. You practice reloading under pressure, assembling and disassembling your weapon blindfolded, and bayonet charges that feel more like interpretive dance with sharp objects. You stab sandbags, you shout, you stab again. You're told to imagine the enemy. But honestly, right now, the enemy is probably your boots. There are breaks, technically, but they're not restful. They're brief moments when you're allowed to lean against a tree, or sip from your canteen, or stare longingly at a patch of sky, and remember that you once had hobbies. Then the whistle goes again, and it's back to it. Occasionally, someone fumbles, trips, drops their rifle, forgets the cadence. There's punishment, usually in the form of extra laps, more push-ups, or a full hour of rifle salute practice until your arms feel like overcooked noodles. Meanwhile, your sergeant looks amused. He's been through this. He did his drills during the last war, or the one before that. He's seen soldiers cry, throw up, pass out, and get back up again. He knows you'll survive. Probably. Maybe. By late morning, your body is moving on instinct. You're no longer marching so much as floating, rhythmically bouncing forward in a state of semi-conscious obedience. The mud no longer registers. The yelling becomes white noise. Your rifle becomes an extension of your arm. You start to hum a little, something soft, something tuneless, something just enough to keep your thoughts company. You glance around. Everyone looks like you. Tired, soaked, slightly broken. And yet, somehow, there's a strange camaraderie forming. Misery, it turns out, is an excellent bonding agent. You march in unison. You suffer in sync. You start to laugh at the same jokes, even the ones that aren't funny. Eventually, after what feels like 3 days, the sergeant announces a break for lunch. It's not quite joy you feel. It's more like conditional relief. Because now it's time for combat rations. You don't know what's inside today's box, but odds are it's either going to taste like tin, salt, or something left too close to a radiator. But at least it's not another drill. At least it doesn't involve more mud. For the moment, your legs are allowed to stop. And so, as the unit drifts toward the mess line, or tears open cardboard K rations, you remember once again that war, and its preparation, is not just about glory. It's about sore shoulders, confused feet, and marching until your brain forgets how to complain. So let your heartbeat settle. Let the sound of synchronized footsteps fade into the background. No one's yelling now. The boots can rest. Because next, We'll take a closer look at what you're about to eat. Lunch during World War II for a US soldier wasn't exactly a gourmet experience. In fact, it was more like a tin can lottery where everyone lost in a different way. These meals, known as sea rations, weren't just food. They were a test of endurance, optimism, and your digestive system's resilience. Served in olive drab cans and handed out with the enthusiasm of a tax audit, sea rations were meant to fuel soldiers during combat or field duty. But the effect was often closer to polite punishment. The contents? Spam, or some close relative of it, pressed tightly into a metal coffin. Sometimes it was labelled meat, with all the confidence of someone not entirely sure what they'd just packed. Other times, soldiers would open a can and discover hardtack crackers, those delightful dental hazards that doubled as shrapnel if broken wrong. Cheese spread was common, although its texture was more reminiscent of wet plaster than dairy. If you were lucky, a small tin of fruit cocktail might show up. That meant a few soggy grapes swimming in syrup, an explosion of sweetness in a world otherwise dominated by salt and beige. One of the more famous, or perhaps infamous, elements of sea rations was the chocolate bar, designed to withstand extreme temperatures, battlefield jolts, and soldier expectations. These bars were so bitter and dense that some joked they were included to demoralize the enemy if they ever found your pack. While labeled as heat-resistant, they resisted joy and flavor even more effectively. Water came from a metal canteen, likely filled from a questionable source earlier that morning. If you were diligent, maybe you tossed in a water purification tablet. If you weren't, you rolled the dice and hoped for the best. Either way, water was gulped fast and tasted faintly of rust, iodine, or aluminum, depending on the age of your gear. Eating wasn't so much a break as it was another assigned task. Soldiers often consumed their meals standing or crouched, helmet off, rifle nearby. You weren't there to savor, you were there to refuel and survive. There was no lunchtime chatter about flavors or seasoning. The only seasoning was sweat and dirt. If it was warm out, your food was lukewarm. If it was cold out, your food was colder. The weather determined your menu mood. As for dessert, sometimes you'd get a packet of gum or a small piece of candy that had fused into its wrapper like some kind of sugary fossil. Sugar was rare and highly valued. Soldiers would trade cigarettes for peanut butter, chocolate, or even for an extra cracker. Food had its own battlefield economy, and chocolate was gold, assuming it hadn't already melted or turned to brick. Digestion wasn't always kind. Latrines, when available, were functional. When not available, let's just say, nature provided alternatives, none of them pleasant. The food wasn't designed to please your stomach. It was designed to keep you moving. Barely. Complaints about sea rat belly were common. Soldiers joked that the enemy wasn't bullets. It was the beef stew tin from last night's dinner. Of course, the military tried to vary the options. You might get pork and beans one day, spaghetti the next. But by all accounts, the differences were subtle at best. One man's spaghetti was another man's meat-flavored wallpaper paste, and the coffee? Instant. Always instant. Packets of powdered coffee that, when combined with hot water, created a drink that was technically brown and technically drinkable. It was, however, beloved. Soldiers clung to their coffee like a lifeline, even if it tasted like boiled pencil shavings. To heat these meals, soldiers used tiny foldable stoves with fuel tablets, or more often, just held the can over a fire with a stick and hoped for the best. There were burns, spills, and the occasional accidental can explosion from forgetting to vent the lid. Many just ate cold and accepted their fate. Warm food was a luxury, and most didn't have time for it. Interestingly, there were official menus, 12 different sea ration menus circulated by 1944. Each included an entree, biscuits or crackers, a dessert or fruit item, instant coffee, sugar, chewing gum, and cigarettes. Yes, cigarettes were part of the meal, for morale, for stress, and because everyone thought they were healthy. Camel, Lucky Strike, and Chesterfield were wartime companions, one puff at a time. Sea rations weren't just meals, they were morale markers. Good rations meant good days, bad rations meant long nights. Soldiers would talk about food constantly, what they'd had, what they missed, what they hoped the next crate would hold. They dreamed of fresh eggs, Warm bread, milk that didn't come in a powder form. Food from home became legend. The letters home often mentioned meals more than battles. In Europe, US soldiers sometimes supplemented their rations by buying or trading with locals. Fresh eggs, cheese, even wine. In the Pacific, this was rarer and much riskier. Jungle conditions made food storage even harder. Tin cans rusted, cracked, or were raided by animals. Insects loved open sea rations. So did rats. One GI in the Philippines reportedly opened his beef and vegetable stew to find both missing and already half-eaten by something that wasn't him. Eventually, C rations were replaced by K rations, lighter, more compact, even less flavorful, and later by modern MREs. But for millions of World War II soldiers, C rations were the culinary background of the war. Every battle, every march, every foxhole, there was a can clanking around in someone's bag. They became symbols of survival and suffering all in one. So the next time you microwave something vaguely edible and complain about it, remember, someone once opened a can of ham and lima beans in a trench, stared at it in silence, and ate it anyway. Not because they wanted to, but because the war didn't pause for flavor. And now, with your belly slightly queasy and your tin can imagination fully stirred, we'll shoulder our gear, pack up the mess kit, and step back into formation. No napkins needed, no 5-star reviews expected. Just another bite of history, swallowed whole. Let's quietly move along to the next part of your day as a World War II soldier. No dessert, no breaks, just heavy gear and heavier silence. It's time to gear up and head out. The call comes, as it always does, when you're just about to sit down or finish tying a boot. Time to move. Again. You bend down, and your back creaks like a barn door. The gear never feels lighter, just more familiar. You strap on the essentials, your helmet, a steel dome that's dented from God knows what. It doesn't keep you warm, but it does keep you worried. Then there's the field pack, an awkward square of canvas packed tighter than a Depression-era suitcase. Inside, a mix of the important and the absurd. Spare socks, extra ammo, a letter from someone back home, and maybe, just maybe, a can of beans that didn't get stepped on. Your rifle is next. It's always nearby. You don't name it, but it feels like a shadow you carry. It's cleaned so often you could disassemble it in your sleep, which frankly, might be the only time you ever get the chance. Alongside it, ammunition clips, a first aid pouch that smells faintly of iodine, and a canteen that's as warm or cold as your luck that day. By the time you're fully dressed, you weigh about 70 pounds more than when you woke up. And that doesn't include emotional baggage, which, if measured, could probably crush a tank. Boots laced, helmet chin straps snug, pack heaved up with a grunt and a shoulder twist. You stand, adjusting straps, feeling the gentle pull of gravity reminding you that you were not built for this. And then comes the shuffle. Not a full march, not yet, but the slow gathering of men becoming a column. No fanfare, no speeches, no brass bands, just boots on gravel. Maybe some coughing. Someone always has a cough. You begin the patrol. It's not glamorous, it's not fast. You walk, slowly, carefully, not because the scenery is nice, though sometimes it is. You walk slowly because you're afraid, and alert, and sore. Every twig crack is an alarm bell. Every bird flutter makes you check your safety. This isn't a firefight. It's not even a mission, really. It's a feeling with boots on. You don't know if this is the hour that goes wrong, the one that turns from boring to bleeding. So you move with caution, with discipline, with the kind of focused paranoia that makes you forget you even had a stomach. Marching becomes rhythmic. You begin to tune in to the sounds, the clink of canteens, the crunch of boots, the breath of the man behind you. Some whisper, some pray, some just walk and try not to think. You're not in charge of the map, but you're pretty sure you've passed the same tree twice, unless all trees just look that suspicious. The squad leader gives a hand signal. You pause, drop to a knee, check the tree line. There's nothing and everything out there. Then up again, move forward. Mud tries to steal your boots. Your socks try to give up entirely, and you just keep walking. Did we mention the smell? War has a smell. And it isn't gunpowder. It's more like sweat, leather, dirt, wet socks, and the faint trace of cigarette smoke that never really leaves your jacket. The countryside may be beautiful, but you're not sightseeing. You're surviving. Interesting fact, the standard issue gear a US soldier carried could weigh up to 70 pounds. And that's before accounting for extra ammo, machine gun parts, or that one guy who insisted on bringing a harmonica. And yet, somehow, you're expected to sprint in this if anything happens. Spoiler, you won't. As you walk, you pass trenches. Old ones from battles weeks ago. Or maybe just last Tuesday. They're shallow now, full of water. Maybe a boot or two still floating. You don't ask questions. You don't linger. Eventually, you stop. Not because it's time, just because someone ahead raised a fist. A signal. The line halts. Everyone crouches, listens, waits. You don't breathe. Or maybe you do, but it sounds like thunder in your own ears. Then, after minutes, or maybe hours, the signal again. Move out. And you do. Slowly. Quietly. The silence is louder than gunfire. Somewhere behind you, someone drops a mess kit. It clatters, absurdly loud. Everyone freezes. Then, nothing. Just a bird flapping away. You feel like you aged 5 years. No one yells. They just stare at the guy with new guilt in his eyes. Eventually, you find your objective. Maybe a hill, maybe a crossroads, maybe just a place to wait and hope. You crouch, you whisper, you hydrate, and yes, the canteen still tastes like aluminum and regret, but at least it's not empty. Yet, you sit for a moment, maybe 20 minutes, maybe an hour, waiting, always waiting. And then comes the realization, you have to do this again, tomorrow, or tonight, or in an hour. But for now, the boots stop. The straps ease, and someone passes around a pack of stale gum, a miracle in thin foil. Let's talk about what it really means to be in the field during World War II. Not the dramatic part where movie music swells and explosions light the sky. No, we're talking about the in-between moments, the long stretches of marching through mud, standing in soggy boots, trying to stay awake while pretending to know what the plan is. It's less Saving Private Ryan and more saving what's left of my socks. First of all, you're out here with your squad, somewhere in the countryside of France, Germany, Italy. The specifics blur together after the 5th rainy day. Your unit's been on the move, and now you've been told to dig in. That's military speak for grab a shovel and start abusing the earth until it looks like a place someone could hide in. So, you dig. And it's never a perfect hole. The ground is either too soft or too hard. There are always rocks the size of baby elephants, right where your back would go. Or worse, you strike something odd and decide it's best not to keep poking. You carve out a foxhole the width of your shoulders and the depth of your dread. You line it with your poncho, which is optimistic at best, and you pretend the trench won't flood when it rains again in 15 minutes, which it will. The weather, by the way, has not been informed that you're fighting a war. It has no respect for heroism. One moment it's misty, romantic even, if you weren't covered in grime. Then suddenly it's snowing sideways, or sleeting, or doing that thing where it rains just hard enough to feel personal. Wind blows straight through your coat and your boots. They gave up last week. Let's talk about those boots. You were issued them, you laced them up, you believed in them, and then the mud happened. Now they're crusted, soaked, and feel like you're wearing wet sandbags. The wool socks? Soaked too. You've started to dream of dry socks the way others dream of home-cooked meals or victory parades. Every step squishes. Every squish is a whisper of trench foot, a very real condition where your feet rot in your boots like leftovers forgotten in the fridge. Delicious. Now that you're settled into your soggy foxhole, you pull your helmet lower and listen. That's the real job here, listening. For rustling branches, distant vehicles, murmurs in languages you're not supposed to understand. It's a little like trying to sleep with one ear open and the other full of mud. You clutch your rifle. You don't fire it, not unless you have to. Ammo isn't exactly handed out like candy. You just wait. Hours pass slowly in the field. One guy hums. Another mutters to himself. Someone is cleaning his weapon again for the 3rd time in an hour. Not because it's dirty, but because it's something to do. Time slows. Hunger nags. But opening your rations now would mean admitting you might be here all night, so you don't. The field teaches you a lot, like how to recognize danger by the way birds go quiet, or how to sleep with one eye cracked open, or how to distinguish between someone coughing and someone cocking a rifle. You learn to live inside silence and fear, to make room for both, and to move through them like fog. Let's also talk about direction. You're given a map, paper, flimsy, smudged, and a compass. Someone points vaguely and says, "We're headed there." There might be a town or a tree line or some high ground that probably isn't as strategic as the brass thinks it is. You march based on trust and guesswork. Getting lost is common, so is being yelled at for being lost. Interesting detail here. US troops during World War II often relied on outdated maps or local guides who weren't always thrilled to help. Compass readings got fuzzy. Fog rolled in. Marching 10 miles in the wrong direction wasn't rare. It was just Thursday. Now you're navigating terrain that isn't built for you. Fields aren't flat. Forests aren't friendly. Everything is damp, foreign, and either hiding a mine or a man with a machine gun. And still, you trudge. Sometimes you find a place to rest. A barn, a ditch, a half-destroyed building, shelter from the storm and the noise. But even then, you don't take off your boots. You don't unwrap your gear. You don't relax. Because at any moment, someone might call "move out," and you'll be back on your feet before your knees forgive you for ever bending. The quiet out here is a different kind of loud. It's filled with nerves, whispers, and the clink of metal on metal. You start to recognize each other by sound. The way Thompson's gear jingles when he walks. The way the new kid coughs when he's nervous. You don't say much. Out here, conversation is expensive. Silence is safer. And sometimes, out of nowhere, there's a firefight. But more often, there isn't. Most of the time in the field is spent not shooting. It's spent waiting, preparing, walking, listening, and trying not to think about what might happen tomorrow, or tonight, or in the next 5 minutes. You write letters in your head. You plan what you'll do when this is over. You miss things you didn't even know you liked. Traffic lights, hot showers, socks that don't smell like defeat. You become someone different in the field. A version of yourself that's quiet, careful, and oddly efficient at opening cans with a bayonet. And as night begins to fall, you feel the chill sink deeper into your uniform. The dampness clings to your ribs. You huddle with your squad. Someone mumbles about home. Someone else jokes about the food. Someone's trying to light a cigarette with matches that were definitely not waterproof. You don't know if tonight will be quiet or not. You hope it is. You hope tomorrow is boring. And you know that even if it is, it will still be hard. You've made it through the day, and the night is just beginning. Now, let's follow that fading light, those low whispers, and the glint of helmets under moonlight as we ease into the next part of this soldier's journey. The long, aching hours of night watch, where sleep is traded for shadows. You pull night watch duty. Again, not that you expected much sleep anyway. The cot's lumpy, your back aches, and someone snores like an angry lawnmower. But this is different. You're not just tired. You're tired in a way that's begun to feel permanent, like your bones are still back at boot camp. Your name's on the roster for sentry duty, and when the list goes up, there's no arguing. Just a nod, a grunt, and a slow shuffle toward wherever the sergeant tells you to stand and squint into the dark for 2 hours. Let's set the scene. You're in a foxhole or behind some sandbags, or leaning against a tree stump pretending it's got your back. Maybe you're near the edge of camp, or maybe they've set up a perimeter somewhere deep in the woods, where the trees creak like nervous old men, and the wind smells like wet socks and gun oil. You're wearing your field jacket, the thick wool one with more holes than buttons, and your helmet keeps slipping down over one eye. You try not to fidget too much. Movement makes noise, and noise gets you a talking to, or worse. This is the night shift soldier, and it's not the cozy kind with fluorescent lighting and break rooms. It's the kind where every gust of wind might be footsteps. Every twig snap could be someone testing your nerves, or your trigger finger. The sky overhead is pitch black or cloudy. If you're lucky, there's a moon, but it doesn't help much. Visibility, barely to the end of your rifle barrel. You've been trained for this, sure. You've memorized silhouettes, practiced call and response passwords, learned how to tell the difference between just a rabbit and start yelling. But training doesn't prepare you for how your brain plays tricks on you when it's past midnight. You've been up for 20 hours, and your last meal was a can of spaghetti that tasted like regret. Interesting fact, and not the kind of thing that shows up in the recruiting brochure, is that soldiers on night watch during World War II frequently hallucinated. Sleep deprivation, stress, hunger, and fear form a cocktail that can make a tree look like a soldier, or a shadow feel like it's breathing. Entire patrols would report hearing footsteps, or whispering just beyond the tree line, only to find nothing. Or worse, nothing at first. And the sleep schedule? A true delight. The rotation typically went like this: 2 hours on, 2 hours off. Not enough time to sleep properly, just enough to make your body furious. So you nap like a squirrel in a thunderstorm, jittery and ready to bolt. Eventually, you stop even calling it sleep. You just close your eyes and hope your brain files something under rest. But even in the dark, humanity sneaks in. Some guys hum to themselves quietly. Others recite baseball stats like prayers. A few pass the time writing letters, hunched over a flashlight with their helmet blocking the glow. They write to sweethearts, to mums, to no one in particular. They write just to remember there's still someone. Some pray, and not just the ones who usually do. War turns agnostics into part-time believers, especially when the wind howls through the trees and you hear rustling that absolutely wasn't there a second ago. You grip your rifle a little tighter, you try to steady your breathing, and you remind yourself, as your sergeant once put it, they're more scared of you than you are of them. You didn't believe it then either. Sometimes there's quiet conversation between rotating guards. Quiet, so it doesn't carry. A whispered joke. A complaint about socks. A grumble about how Smitty never pulls his weight. It's human, fragile, and fleeting. But it helps. And then there are the noises you can't explain. Rustling that seems too steady to be wind. Footsteps that stop when you look up. A faint glimmer of movement in the brush. Your finger brushes the safety on your rifle. You wait. You listen. And after 5 minutes of tense silence, it turns out to be a hedgehog. Or once, a raccoon who's seen too much. Let's not forget the weather. Rain is common. It slides down your helmet, soaks your collar, and pools in your boots. Your poncho is basically decorative. Cold is worse. It creeps into your gloves, your socks, your spine. You bounce on your toes to stay warm, then freeze when you hear something. There's no comfort here, just duty and dampness. In some parts of Europe, fog rolls in at night. Thick, ghostly fog that hugs the ground and makes the world vanish beyond arm's length. It distorts sounds, makes whispers sound like shouts, makes twigs breaking feel like gunshots. In places like the Ardennes, it wasn't uncommon for entire units to go hours without knowing who was still nearby. You're not alone, but you feel like you are, and that's the point. Night watch isn't just about guarding the perimeter, it's about watching yourself, staying sharp when everything inside you says lie down, give in, sleep now. You don't. Because it's your job, because your buddies are counting on you, and because you're afraid of what might happen if you close your eyes for too long. Now, imagine this every night. Not just once, not just during training, but over and over. Sleep in 2-hour slices, dreams interrupted by orders, a body always half awake, a mind constantly bracing for noise. It wears you down. But somehow, you keep doing it. Eventually, your shift ends. Someone taps your shoulder, your relief, bleary-eyed and muttering. You mutter back. You crawl into your damp cot or foxhole, curl up with your rifle and try to sleep. You don't dream anymore, not really. Just images, boots, mud, soup cans, flashlights, all jumbled and incomplete. And you hope tomorrow brings better weather. Maybe warm socks, maybe not more marching, but you don't count on it. So now, as the night watch winds down in our story, let's ease out of the tension. The boots are quiet now. The raccoon is gone. The fog has lifted, or at least it's agreed to stay polite. The fire from the mess tent crackles faintly in the distance. Somewhere someone is snoring again. And you? You're safe here. No rifles, no whistles, no hedge rustling suspiciously. Just a quiet room, a warm bed, and the knowledge that you, mercifully, don't have to keep watch tonight. That job's over. For now. Let's settle in. And when you're ready, we'll move on to the brief, strange pockets of downtime soldiers got. Moments filled with cards, lice, and letters that made the war feel a little more human. So, it's downtime, which doesn't mean what you think it means. In the civilian world, downtime implies hammocks, naps, and possibly iced tea. In a World War II foxhole, downtime is just the part of the day when no one is actively shouting at you or shooting near your general direction. That doesn't make it restful. It makes it quieter, that's all. Let's start with the basics. Your rifle is leaned carefully against your dugout wall. Not far, never far. And your boots are off for the first time in what feels like several months, revealing toes that resemble pickled prunes and socks stiff enough to be used as blunt weapons. You're sitting on something that might be a tree stump or a very offended rock. Your buddy from Chicago has just reshuffled a deck of cards with hands that haven't been properly washed in 3 weeks. Welcome to one of the most sacred military rituals, the field card game. Usually poker, always cheating. The stakes aren't high, nobody has any money, so it's cigarettes, chocolate, or a clean pair of socks, all precious commodities. And somehow, the guy from Kentucky always wins, despite claiming not to understand the rules. It's suspicious. You don't question it. You just light a cigarette with a match that barely sparks and let the moment pass slowly. Interesting detail. US soldiers were issued cigarettes in their rations. Called coffin nails, they were supposed to provide stress relief, which frankly is fair. If you were crouching in the mud for hours a day, being issued a little box of calm might feel less like poison and more like policy. Now, cards aside, downtime also includes letters. Letters home are more than just messages. They are lifelines to mothers, wives, sweethearts, or that girl from the dance who said she'd write but maybe forgot you existed the minute you boarded the train. Still, you write. You write about the weather, the food, the quiet times. You don't mention the other stuff, the artillery, the guy who didn't come back from patrol, the moment you thought your boots had finally grown permanent mold. Soldiers often carried their loved ones' letters in their breast pockets, folded, creased, sweat-stained, but never thrown out. Some read them over and over. Some didn't open them at all, saving them for later, for when they needed something more than instant coffee and sarcasm. Then there are the lice. Oh, the lice. Lice are the unofficial mascots of military life. They thrive in your collar, your seams, your hat, anywhere warm and unwashed, which is basically everything. You scratch, you complain, you participate in lice checks, which are part hygiene, part social bonding. Hey buddy, I'll check your neck if you check mine. It's intimate, in the most unromantic way possible. Soap exists, but it's a joke. Field showers are scheduled when the water truck arrives, or the unit is rotated to somewhere with plumbing. Until then, it's splash washing from your canteen, or a communal bucket, if you're lucky. Underwear gets changed less frequently than seasons. You learn to accept a base level of grime, and everyone smells the same, like a mixture of sweat, canvas, and mild despair. Laundry, when it happens, is another adventure. You wash your uniform in whatever water you find, a stream, a puddle, a barrel that may have once held fuel. You beat the fabric with rocks or sticks, not out of tradition but frustration. Then you hang it on a line, only to have a jeep drive by and cover it in dust again. It's a process. You do it anyway. The downtime hours crawl. Some soldiers write poetry, others whittle. A few swap rumors about the war, the generals, or the girl from the Red Cross tent who might be dating all of headquarters. Someone starts singing, badly. Someone else complains about the singing. Then it's quiet again. There's also the occasional game of what would you eat if you could eat anything? It's a popular pastime. New York guys talk about bagels, Southern guys miss biscuits, and one guy from Idaho just wants a potato that hasn't been dehydrated and rehydrated so many times it's legally a mineral. Sometimes, if you're lucky, a USO show swings through. A few songs, a couple of jokes, maybe a celebrity in a uniform shaking hands awkwardly. It's a surreal experience. Then they're gone, and you're back to cards, letters, and scratching your ankles through your trousers. There's little true rest. because the mind never truly lets go. You keep an ear tuned to boots and gravel. Your body is tired, but your nerves are always on edge. So you lay on your back and look at the sky, watching clouds or planes, whichever appears first. You hope for mail. You dread orders. You dream if you sleep. Interesting fact. Some GIs pass the time by crafting elaborate trench art. Items made from shell casings, buttons, and leftover metal. Rings, lighters, even tiny figurines. A way to control something, to make beauty from ruin, or just to keep their hands busy. And then, of course, there's gossip. Who's going home? Who isn't? Which officer got reassigned? Which supply unit mysteriously received 3 cases of steak while you're still eating ham in a can? It's petty, pointless, and strangely comforting. Because in a place where nothing makes sense, sometimes griping about the bad coffee is the only thing that still does. And then, downtime ends. The cards are packed up, letters folded, cigarettes stubbed out in old ration tins. Someone yells, somewhere. It always starts with yelling. You lace your boots, you check your gear, you wonder how you can already feel more tired than when you started. But for a few minutes, maybe an hour, you weren't a number on a roster or a blur in a foxhole. You were just a guy playing cards, a soldier writing to his mum, a tired human being who managed to laugh about lice. And that's something. Now let's shift quietly toward the next small patch of peace. If it's what the brass calls rest and recreation. Spoiler, it rarely includes either. R&R, rest and recreation. 2 simple words, whispered like a prayer by exhausted US soldiers across every front line in World War II. It promised salvation, a break from the yelling, a chance to be human again, if only briefly. But of course, nothing in war is ever simple, and R&R was no beach vacation. Let's say you're one of the lucky ones. Your unit is rotated out of the front. Nobody lost a leg this week. The orders came down. You boys are going to town. Suddenly, morale rises. Everyone starts brushing off dirt and checking their faces in cracked mirrors. Showers, if available, become high-priority tactical objectives. Soap becomes more valuable than ammunition. Razors, which haven't seen much use lately, are hunted down. Even a splash of cologne, sent from home months ago, is applied in generous clouds, despite being mostly evaporated by now. Because even in wartime, people want to feel like people again. Rest and recreation usually meant a few hours or days in a nearby city, village, or even a converted camp behind the lines. It all depended on where you were stationed. For some in France or Italy, it meant cobblestone streets, cafes, and wine that was slightly less sour than the chow. For those in the Pacific, it meant coconut groves, cold beer, and maybe a swing band playing from the back of a truck. What did soldiers do during R&R? Well, what do exhausted, stressed, and barely showered young men with loaded wallets and no supervision do in a foreign country after months of danger? They drank. They drank fast, loud, and with enthusiasm that bordered on medical emergency. Local bars became overflowing with olive drab uniforms. Soldiers packed into tiny taverns, bumping elbows with British troops, Canadians, French resistance fighters, and the occasional very lost logistics officer. Beer was the usual go-to. Wine was second. Hard liquor, usually local and usually terrible, was third. A drink called Victory Gin in England was basically flavoured ethanol. In Italy, they drank grappa that could strip paint. In the South Pacific, GIs invented cocktails out of powdered lemonade and whatever came in unlabeled bottles. Some soldiers didn't drink, of course. Some went straight to sleep, 14, 16, 20 hours at a time, their bodies finally crashing from the endless alertness. You'd see them passed out on cots, under trees, even in church pews, still wearing boots and helmets, like they were afraid peace might end at any second. Which, to be fair, it might. For others, R&R was about food. Glorious, greasy, uncanned food. If you could find it, that is. Soldiers would pool money for a roast chicken. They'd trade rations for a loaf of real bread. One GI reportedly wept when handed a plate of scrambled eggs. Real eggs, not powdered paste. Then there were brothels. Yes, we're going there, because history doesn't wear gloves. Brothels operated near many military zones. Some were regulated by the army. Others were unofficial and questionable. Troops were warned, of course. Pamphlets, lectures, and posters told them to avoid disease and regret. But let's be honest, soldiers far from home, starved for affection and normalcy, didn't always heed the pamphlets. In fact, venereal disease became such a rampant problem that the US Army launched a full-blown campaign to address it. Posters hung in latrines showing grim warnings. "Don't gamble with your life," one read, featuring a skeleton wearing lipstick. Medics handed out condoms like they were candy. Some units even kept venereal cards, little checklists for symptoms. Truly a romantic souvenir. But not every soldier sought pleasure in drink or strangers. Some spent R&R attending church services. Quiet ones. Gentle hymns sung off-key by men who hadn't seen a choir in years. Chaplains held mass in burned-out barns, under trees, or inside makeshift tents. Soldiers cried, not loudly, just enough for it to matter. Others wandered markets, tried to speak broken Italian, bought trinkets, pins, scarves, handmade bracelets. Some mailed them home with notes like, "For Mom," or "Save this for when I get back." A few drew sketches, wrote poems, recorded records on portable booths and sent them across the sea. Just voices in envelopes, hoping to sound brave. The locals were mixed. In some towns, people embraced the GIs. Children waved. Women offered bread and wine. Old men nodded from doorways, tipping hats and mumbling prayers. In others, the reception was cold. The soldiers were liberators, yes, but also foreign. Loud. Armed. Sometimes careless. Fights happened. Shops were broken into. There were misunderstandings. Language barriers. Sometimes fear. Bar fights were common. One British pub had a sign, "No Americans or Canadians after 9 p.m. Too many broken stools. Too many black eyes. Too much bravado. Men coiled too tightly from war don't always unwind gently." And yet, there was laughter. Real, deep, belly laughter. The kind that makes you forget the mud and the marching and the letters marked "Return to Sender." In those rare moments, you remembered what it felt like to be 20 years old, hungry for life instead of just rations. Interesting fact. In 1945, at the end of the war in Europe, the US Army established official rest centers in Paris. They had hot showers, real beds, movies, dances, and even psychiatrists. It was a glimpse of normal, a sliver of home. But most R&Rs weren't that polished. They were messy, chaotic, tender, and short. Eventually, the time came. Always too soon. The officer called names, the trucks rumbled, canteens were refilled, helmets straightened. And like that, R&R was over. The return to the front was quiet. No one sang. Some clutched a bottle, others a letter. Everyone was tired again. But different, because even a brief break, even one full of awkward flirting and cheap wine, reminded soldiers that they were still alive. Still, people, not just parts in a giant machine. So as you let your breathing slow, imagine for a moment. A young man, his boots off, his back against a wall in a French cafe, sipping something sweet and unidentifiable. He laughs. Not because the war is funny, but because for 5 minutes, it isn't. Now we leave the bar, we put the helmet back on, because ahead there's more waiting. The field awaits, the fear returns. You wake up to the sound of thunder, but there's no storm, just war, artillery, mortars, shells screaming overhead like banshees with bad manners. The earth shakes, your bones feel it before your ears do. Dirt rains down, and everything smells like smoke and damp metal. This is combat. Forget what the movies taught you. Bullets don't make a clean little pew noise. Explosions don't come with violins. And nobody's giving a speech. There are no soaring strings or dramatic slow motion, just chaos. You're crouched in a foxhole. Not a metaphorical one, but an actual hole you helped dig with a shovel that now feels like it weighs more than your whole arm. The ground is wet, cold, unforgiving. You've been here too long. Or maybe not. Long enough. Time doesn't move normally in a firefight. Seconds stretch, hours vanish. The guy next to you, private something from somewhere, grips his rifle like it might fly away. You haven't spoken much, but if things go bad, you'll throw yourself on him without hesitation, and he'd do the same. You don't fight for generals. You You fight for whoever shares your trench snacks. Let's break this down. What does combat actually feel like for a US soldier in World War II? Start with the sound. Explosions don't just deafen, they erase thoughts. A shell lands nearby, and it feels like someone dropped the sky. You go blind for a second, ears ringing. You try to breathe, but the air is dust and panic. It's not like a punch. It's like the air itself turns against you. Machine guns rattle from somewhere you can't see. M1 Garands bark back. You shoot, maybe at something, maybe at nothing. Sometimes you fire because the guy next to you fires. Other times, you save your rounds for when it's personal. Interesting fact, many soldiers only ever fired their weapons in training. In the chaos of battle, a large number either never saw the enemy or froze entirely. Combat is noise, dirt, instinct, and often hesitation. Then there's the confusion. Orders get lost. Radios break. Maps are out of date. You might be facing the enemy, or walking right into your own side's fire. That happens more than anyone likes to admit. Friendly fire isn't rare. It's part of the terrain. Visibility? Forget it. Smoke, fog, and debris obscure everything. You shout to be heard, and even then it's garbled. You learn to read hands, shoulders, even silences. A raised eyebrow can mean move. A grunt can mean get down. The mud grabs at your boots like it has an opinion. Your helmet slips sideways. Your hands shake. You smell everything. Blood, cordite, sweat, wet wool. The cold? It's not cinematic. It's just miserable. Your fingers stop working. Your trigger finger cramps. You chew on the inside of your mouth to stay awake. You're not worried about glory. You're worried about socks. And then someone screams. Not dramatically, just sharp. Cut off. Maybe a mortar found them. Maybe they tripped a wire. Maybe you'll find out. Maybe you won't. You pull them behind cover if you can. You press a bandage into something warm and red. And then you keep moving. There's no pause button. Funny thing, you start to memorize the sounds of certain shells. Mortars have a whoomp. Artillery has a whistle. Grenades don't sound like they do in movies. They pop, hiss, bark. If you hear a buzzing overhead, it might be an MG42, the German machine gun nicknamed Hitler's buzzsaw. You dive before you think. Then there's the fear. It doesn't always show as screaming. Often, it's silence. Shaking hands. A soldier mumbling the same prayer. Someone lighting a cigarette with a shaking match. Eyes that don't blink. Fear in war is quiet. It doesn't want to attract attention. You might be shot at for 10 minutes or 10 hours. You might walk out of the foxhole the same man. Or not. Interesting fact. The average frontline soldier in World War II was involved in combat for significantly longer than in previous wars. Days, weeks, months. Many never had a true break. Shell shock, now called PTSD, wasn't just a possibility, it was a companion. But here's the strange part. You adapt. Your body adjusts to the adrenaline. You start to recognize your unit's voices. You learn the routines, where to duck, when to run, how to reload by feel. You become hyper-aware. A snapping twig means danger. A lull in noise feels like a trap. And then it ends, sort of. The guns go quiet. There's a moment, no music, just wind and breathing. You look around. Someone lights a cigarette. Someone checks a wound. Someone cries quietly. You wipe dirt from your face and realize it's not just dirt. It's blood. Yours? You check. Not this time. There's always a head count. Not official. Just eyes scanning for familiar faces. One guy doesn't sit down. Another's gear is piled where he used to sleep. You don't talk about it. You just notice. And remember. And then you move again. Because the front shifts. Orders come down. Trucks arrive. Or don't. And you don't think about the big picture. Not really. You're not planning strategy. You're not writing history books. You're just trying to keep your boots dry, your rifle clean, and your buddy breathing. The fire, the dirt, the screaming. It's part of the job. You didn't sign up for it, not really. But now it's part of you. You survive. Until you don't. Or until the war ends. Or until someone says, we're pulling back. But combat. It's not about big speeches or last stands. It's mostly waiting, then panicking, then silence. Now, as you rest, safe, warm, far from foxholes, Think of the quiet after a firefight, the strange peace, the silence with a heartbeat, the breathing that returns like an awkward guest. It's not glorious, but it's real. Next up, we rewind the clock a bit to basic training. Because before the mud, there was the mess hall. And before the foxhole, there was the boot camp, where every soldier begins and wonders what they've gotten into. Before the mud, the bullets, the boots soaked through with yesterday's rain. Before all that, there was yelling. So much yelling. You step off the bus at the training facility, fresh from whatever corner of America you came from, and you're immediately greeted by a human tornado in a uniform with a hat pressed so tight to his head it might be welded on. This is your drill sergeant. You'll never forget his voice, mostly because it will echo in your head for months after you leave. Welcome to basic training. It doesn't start with a warm bed and a soft breakfast. It starts with confusion. A lot of people talking all at once, paperwork flying, your name shouted, mispronounced, shouted again. You're given a uniform that doesn't fit, and boots that feel like medieval punishment devices. You're handed a bunk assignment, but don't get too attached. That bed will be made and remade enough times to develop intimacy issues. Boot camp isn't about comfort. It's about transition. Civilian to soldier, individual to unit. You to someone who can take orders at 5 a.m. without questioning your life choices. Out loud, at least. Your hair, gone. Clippers buzz across your scalp before you can ask if you'll get a mirror. The logic is hygiene and uniformity. The real reason is to make you less you and more one of them. Your name? For now, it's private, maggot, or hey you. Your individuality is gently, and by gently, we mean aggressively, filed down. The first few days are a blur of shouting, standing in lines, and wondering if your decision was entirely wise. You meet your unit, a collection of confused young men from places you've never been. One talks too much, one says nothing. One cries during the second night. No one talks about it, but everyone heard it. You'll be closer than family soon, but for now, you're just all trying not to be the one who gets singled out. Now the fun begins. Push-ups, marching, more push-ups. You wake up sore and go to bed sorer. The obstacle course isn't optional. It's designed to break you down and build you up, in that order. You crawl through mud under barbed wire while being yelled at. You run up hills with a pack full of sandbags. You learn to climb over walls, not because you want to, but because you must. And then there's rifle drill. Your M1 Garand becomes your best friend, your worst enemy, your new dance partner. You learn to clean it, carry it, shoot it, and, when punished, hold it over your head until your arms feel like wet spaghetti. You're taught the parts, the motions, the weight, and you better not drop it. The punishment for dropping your rifle is memorable, not because it's creative, but because it hurts. Usually your pride, sometimes your triceps. Interesting fact, basic training during World War II lasted about 8 weeks, though this varied depending on the branch and period of the war. Early on, training was more thorough. As the war dragged on and bodies were needed faster, it was shortened in some places to just 6 weeks. That's 6 weeks to go from barely knowing how to tie your boots to being expected to land on a beach in France without panicking. But you don't just learn to shoot, you learn to march. Precisely, rhythmically, endlessly. Left, right, left. Keep step. Dress right. Eyes front. Your body learns to move without thinking. Your feet develop a memory of their own. You can spot the guy out of step from a mile away, unless you're the guy out of step, in which case you'll be doing extra push-ups. Again. And then there's scrubbing. Everything must be clean, boots polished, beds perfectly made, corners tight enough to bounce a quarter off of, and they will test it. If that quarter doesn't bounce, you'll be remaking your bed until your soul is clean. You scrub floors, latrines, sometimes each other's gear. You clean things that don't seem dirty. You sweep outdoors. You wash walls. If it can be polished, you polish it. If it can be folded, you fold it. And if it can be yelled at, it gets yelled at. Mess hall becomes an event. Not because the food is good, it isn't, but because it's brief and loud and full of rules. You learn to eat fast. You chew in rhythm. You learn not to talk. Or if you do, you learn not to be heard. Because talking means attention, and attention means more yelling. Showers are group affairs. Privacy is a luxury reserved for people not currently training to possibly be shot at. You learn to shower in record time, avoid eye contact, and always, always keep track of your towel. Losing your towel is a tragic event, but it's not all discipline and mud. You start to bond, slowly, quietly. You learn who snores, who tells good jokes, who writes letters every night, and who pretends not to be homesick. You share stories, socks, cough drops. You start to function like a team. It's not magic, it's muscle memory and misery shared. Then come inspections. Everything is checked. Uniforms, weapons, bunks, lockers. If your boots aren't shined or your rifle isn't clean enough to reflect the sun into someone's face, you'll be cleaning and shining until your fingers blister, and you do it again tomorrow. And then there are mistakes. Someone falls out of formation. Someone forgets their canteen. Someone stumbles during drill. You all pay. Punishment is collective. You learn fast that you're only as strong as the slowest guy. You lift him up or you suffer with him. That's the rule. Your drill sergeant? He's terrifying, sure. But slowly you realize he's molding you, not just into a fighter, but into someone who follows, functions, and doesn't freeze when it counts. The shouting is part of the system. The chaos is curated. He's building something, and unfortunately, that something is you. One day, you get your first weekend pass. A few hours of freedom. You use it to sleep mostly. Maybe call home. Maybe eat something that doesn't come with powdered potatoes. And when you return, the camp smells like home. You hate that. You graduate, not with cap and gown, but with a final inspection and a transfer order. You're done with basic. Now comes advanced training, or transport, or orders to ship out. And despite everything, a part of you feels ready. Ready-ish, because basic didn't just train your body, it rewired your brain. You flinch at the sound of a whistle. You clean things compulsively. You can disassemble a rifle blindfolded. You've been yelled at so much, silence feels suspicious. You're not a warrior yet, but you're not just a civilian anymore. And now, as the lights dim in the barracks, or wherever you are now, you remember the beginning. The mud, the march, the mind games. You're a soldier. Sort of. Almost. The uniform fits now. The boots are broken in. You still hate reveille, but you don't miss roll call anymore. Sleep now if you can, but don't forget, the real battle's not over. Next, we go inward, inside the helmet, inside the thoughts, into the part of war that drills can't prepare you for, the restless mind. The mind of a soldier at war is not all discipline and adrenaline. It's something stranger, softer, messier. Somewhere between the drills and the dirt naps, between the inspections and the explosions, a quiet voice starts to grow louder. It asks inconvenient questions. It loops odd thoughts. It invents nonsense to stay sane. You don't think you're unraveling, but you do start to count the ceiling cracks in the tent. Over and over. In war, you learn something important. There is such a thing as too much silence. You thought you'd crave it. After all, the days are loud. Boots stomping, engines rumbling, commanders barking, planes overhead. But when everything stops, that's when your brain starts marching without you. Let's be honest, most of war isn't action. Most of it is waiting. Long, dull stretches of nothing, punctuated by short, sharp bursts of something you'll never forget. So while you're not getting shot at, yet, you're thinking. And sometimes that's worse. You lie in a foxhole or on your cot or under a truck, staring up at a sky that doesn't care what happens next. You listen to the wind flap a torn tent flap. You listen to someone 2 bunks over snore like a cement mixer. You listen to your own breathing and wonder how many more of them you'll get. This is when you start talking to yourself. Not out loud usually, though some guys do. One guy in your unit swears he has conversations with his boots. Another tells jokes to his rifle. You don't judge. You carve a name into your helmet, not your own. You don't know why. It just felt like something to do. You remember people, faces, streets, smells, Things you didn't think mattered back home now seem enormous. You think of a dog you walked once, a diner that always smelled like burnt toast, the way your sister used to hum off key. It's all clearer now than your own reflection. Some soldiers write, not full-blown novels, there's no time for that, but letters, poems, scraps of thoughts on the back of maps. You've seen a guy write a haiku about canned beans. You've watched another fill a pocket Bible with sketches of his hometown. It's not about beauty, it's about escape, even if just for 5 minutes, even if just in ink. Interesting fact, many US soldiers kept tiny journals, often in waterproof pouches. These weren't meant for publication, they were meant for sanity. Some were filled with jokes, others with the names of the fallen, still others with meticulous records of what they ate. One private famously recorded how many times he stubbed his toe on the same truck bumper. 13, in case you're curious. Humor becomes a kind of armor. Not the metal kind, that doesn't help much against artillery, but the kind that keeps your soul from rusting. The jokes are dark, morbid, inappropriate, and they help. You laugh when someone complains that their socks are trying to eat their feet. You smirk when someone bets they can eat a whole can of Spam in under 30 seconds, and instantly regrets it. One corporal draws cartoons of the officers. Exaggerated noses, wild eyebrows, oversized medals. He pins them up in the latrine. They mysteriously disappear every morning, reappear again by lunch. Nobody confesses. Everybody knows. Faith shifts. Some dig deeper into it. Every prayer, every verse, every cross becomes a shield. Others drift from it. The war makes no sense, and neither do miracles. Some find comfort in chaplains. Some find comfort in silence. One private builds a tiny shrine out of rations and a photo of his wife. He kneels in front of it every night. He says nothing. We let him be. Time becomes a suggestion, not a rule. Hours blur. Days blend. You measure life in meals, mail calls, and mosquito bites. You find yourself counting steps, stars, the number of scratches on your mess tin. It's not useful, but it's something. Dreams become strange, sometimes violent, sometimes tender. You once dreamed you were back home, riding a bicycle made of spaghetti. You woke up smiling. You've also dreamed of falling into mud that whispers your name. You didn't tell anyone about that one. Hallucinations aren't uncommon, especially after long nights and little food. You once saw a dog that wasn't there. It didn't bark, just sat there, looked at you, then vanished. You didn't mention it. Others have seen worse. One guy swears he saw his mother walking through the camp, holding his old lunchbox. She waved, then disappeared. Some soldiers collect things, not souvenirs, just objects. A pebble from a road in Italy, a patch of bark from a French tree, a feather from a bird no one could name. These items have no tactical value but enormous emotional weight. You hide them in your sock or under your helmet liner. You don't know why, you just do. You find comfort in tiny routines. Folding your socks the same way. Drinking your coffee, if you have it, at the same hour. Lining up your gear in the same order, even when there's no inspection coming. Control is rare, so you seize it where you can. Some turn philosophical. A guy in your tent starts quoting Shakespeare. You're not sure he's doing it right, but no one corrects him. Another debates the meaning of courage while cleaning his bayonet. You half listen, nodding at the right moments. Some turn inward, reliving memories like old films on loop. You remember a beach trip, a high school teacher who always smelled like chalk. The last time you said goodbye without realizing it would be the last time. And some turn numb. Not cold, just blank. They stop talking, stop reacting. They go through the motions. They follow orders. They smile when they're supposed to. You try not to end up like them, but you get it. You really do. You think about the future, but only vaguely. Home feels like a foreign country. You wonder if your bed still exists, if your neighborhood still smells the same, if your dog remembers you. You think about what you'll do when this ends. Open a store, write a book, sleep for a year. You know, deep down, most of that won't happen. but it helps to imagine. You also think about the guys who didn't make it, not always directly, sometimes just a flash of memory, a laugh, a nickname, an empty bunk. You don't dwell, but you don't forget. And now, as you lie in your bunk, fingers laced behind your head, you hear the low murmur of someone else dreaming out loud, the creak of a cot, the wind against canvas, and somewhere, the faint whisper of boots on gravel, a night patrol returning or leaving. This is the mind of a soldier. It's not heroic, it's not always brave, but it's full of longing, laughter, fear, and memories too loud to ignore. And tomorrow? Tomorrow you do it all again. Next, we'll open one of the most cherished and dreaded packages of wartime life, the ones from home. The letters arrive like ghosts, late, pale, and often full of things you didn't expect. Sometimes they come in stacks, sometimes not at all. But when the mailbag finally drops, everything in camp pauses, even the officers. There's a ritual to it. A quiet crowd gathers, pretending not to hope. A sergeant stands there, reading names like he's calling out lottery winners. You watch each letter get claimed, handed over like a sacred relic, or folded away like a fragile secret. Some men cheer. Some get very quiet. One guy smiles and walks off, only to rip it up behind the latrine. Mail call in the middle of a war is an emotional roulette wheel. You never know if the envelope will carry comfort, confusion, or catastrophe. Maybe it's a letter from your kid brother, complete with terrible drawings of tanks and dinosaurs. Maybe it's from your mum, still calling you her brave little man, even though you've seen things no man should. Or maybe it's from that girl, the one whose handwriting you know better than your own. And sometimes it's a letter you don't want, the kind that starts with, "I'm sorry," or "You should sit down." Someone's gone, someone changed their mind, or someone married your best friend. You don't cry, not right away. There's no time for that. Just a long exhale, a stare into the middle distance, and maybe a quiet curse at the sky. Interesting fact, during World War II, the US military used something called V-mail, or victory mail. It was a clever solution to a logistical nightmare. Soldiers and civilians would write their letters on special forms, which were then photographed and transferred onto microfilm. That film was shipped across the ocean, and the letters were reprinted at their destination. This saved massive amounts of cargo space. A single mailbag of microfilm could carry the equivalent of 37 mail sacks. But the letters arrived smaller, colder, like echoes of the original. You hold your letter like it's breathing. Maybe it smells like perfume. Maybe like paper and dust. You read it once. Then again. Then again. You read it so many times you start to memorize the punctuation, the loop of a G, the smudge from what might be a tear or a coffee stain. And then, when you're ready, you write back. But writing from a war zone is like trying to send a poem from inside a storm. You want to be honest, but not too honest. You don't want to scare them. You don't want to sound broken. So you mention the food, the weather, a funny story about the guy who tried to shave with a bayonet. You say you're fine. You say you're busy. You say you're looking forward to home. You don't mention the things you've seen, the things you can't unsee. You don't mention the night you didn't sleep because the guy next to you stopped breathing and you weren't sure why. You don't mention how loud it is when you close your eyes, or how quiet it is when you don't. You tell them you miss them, but you don't say how much because you're afraid it'll make it real. Some letters don't get answered. Some never arrive. Sometimes the censors cut parts out. Black lines across sentences that someone, somewhere decided were too dangerous to send. You joke about it. You say your mum's going to think you've become a spy. You say the army's just mad because you criticize the coffee. But deep down, you know what the letters mean. They're the only thing that still feels personal. Everything else, the gear, the food, the schedule, is issued, shared, standardized. But a letter, that's yours. That's your name, in handwriting, from someone who knows you outside the uniform. Sometimes you carry them into the field, folded up in your chest pocket, close to the skin, like armor, like proof. Sometimes guys tuck a photo inside their helmet. A wife, a baby, a dog. One guy has a picture of a baseball field. Just grass and bleachers and peace. Others don't get mail. They never say why. Maybe no one knows they're here. Maybe no one's left. You don't ask. But when your letter comes, you read it out loud. Just a line or two. Just enough to share the warmth. That's how it goes. Small kindness in a place that doesn't offer many. There's always the question of how much has changed back home. Cities look different. People get older. You can feel the distance, not just in miles, but in moods. You're out here living in mud and metal, and they're talking about ration, stamps and radio shows. It's not their fault. It's just a different war. You write about what you can, that the stars look sharp out here, like they're staring back, that the boots leak, that you're tired of canned beans, but would give your left arm for a cold soda. You keep it light. You keep it moving. But every letter is a bridge. Every envelope is a heartbeat. Interesting fact, during World War II, the military postal system processed more than 2.5 billion pieces of mail. That's letters, packages, postcards, you name it. Mail delivery was considered essential to morale. In fact, entire units were sometimes pulled out of combat rotation just to receive long overdue letters. A soldier with no mail was a soldier slipping into silence. Packages were rare but treasured. A tin of cookies, usually crushed. A knitted scarf, even in summer. A book, pages curled from the ocean voyage. You ration them out. 1 cookie a day, 1 chapter at night. The scarf becomes a pillow. The book, a blanket for your brain. And sometimes, the letter you were waiting for never comes. You wait. You pretend not to notice. You pretend harder. Until one day, you stop checking. You let someone else take your place in line. But more often than not, something arrives. Maybe late, maybe faded, maybe just a postcard with 4 words. Still here. Love you. And that's enough. You tuck it away. You exhale. You get up and go to chow. Because that's what you do. You march. You carry. You remember. You write. And when the next mail call comes, you'll be there. Heart open. Helmet slightly askew. Hopeful, even if it hurts. Next, let's follow what happens when hope cracks. When everything breaks. When the body doesn't make it, and the medic steps in. You never think it's going to be you. That's something soldiers all quietly believe, tucked deep behind the helmet straps and folded up in their chest pockets alongside those old letters from home. You hear the gunfire, the shouts, the distant echo of mortars, and you move like you're invincible, because you have to. But when it finally happens, when the pain strikes and the blood comes, the illusion dissolves as fast as your grip on the rifle. If you're lucky, and war runs on luck more than strategy, there's a medic nearby. He's not a doctor. He might not even be much older than you, but he's fast, focused, and somehow still standing in the middle of chaos with a bag full of bandages and more adrenaline than fear. You don't call him Sir. You call him by name or just yell something like Doc and hope he hears it through the smoke and the mess. He finds you. He drops beside you, his helmet marked with a red cross that doesn't always protect him the way it's supposed to. He's not armed. He's not safe. But he's there. The first thing is always pressure, then gauze, then a bandage that's probably been reused more times than you want to imagine. The morphine comes next, a tiny metal syrette pressed into your thigh. The relief is sudden and strange, like the war is happening to someone else, somewhere else. Interesting fact, morphine was distributed in sealed single-use metal tubes that soldiers and medics carried with them. It wasn't perfect, and yes, it could cause addiction. But in the moment, it was a miracle. They patch you up enough to move you. Sometimes that means dragging. Sometimes it means a stretcher. 2 guys you've never seen before grab your corners and jog you back behind the lines, ducking through hedgerows or rubble. Every bump is a galaxy of pain. There's no real hospital. Not here. Just a tent with flaps that never close, muddy ground, and the smell of iodine and fear. The Mobile Army Surgical Hospital, the MASH, isn't glamorous. It's not even clean. But it's where you go when you're between worlds, no longer fighting, not yet resting. Inside, it's chaos wrapped in calm. Nurses move quickly, with faces like stone and hands like silk. Surgeons mutter, operate, sweat. The lights are too bright, The blanket's too thin. The conversation's short. What's your name? What's the date? Do you still feel that? And then nothing. Or dreams. Or someone's voice from somewhere else. Interesting fact. The use of penicillin in World War II was a turning point. Discovered in 1928, but mass-produced during the war, penicillin reduced infection rates and saved hundreds of thousands of lives. Before that, even a small wound could mean fever, gangrene, and death. But penicillin wasn't always available, especially not in the field. So the doctors had to work fast. They cut, cleaned, stitched, hoped. And if you needed more than hope, say, a leg gone to shrapnel or a bullet in the belly, they made choices. Hard ones. Amputation was common. It wasn't cruelty. It was survival. If the infection set in, they had hours, sometimes minutes. They sawed, they tied off, they moved on. There wasn't time for explanation. You wake up groggy, missing something. A boot, a bandage, a limb. And someone tries to talk you through it. You're alive, they say. You nod. What else can you do? Recovery is different for everyone. Some men heal fast, physically at least. They joke, play cards, write home with their non-dominant hand. Others go quiet, stare at the ceiling, wait for the next round of news. You're being sent back. You're going home. You're staying here. The hospital tent has its own rhythm. Nurses double as psychologists. Medics swap dark humor like currency. A radio crackles softly in the corner. Big band music from a world that doesn't feel quite real anymore. You meet others like you, guys missing pieces, guys who got lucky, guys who didn't. And sometimes you meet ghosts, not real ones, not the kind in sheets, but the kind that sit next to your cot and stare out through your eyes. You don't say much, but they know. They were there too. Some soldiers never leave the hospital. Some recover and return to their units. Some are sent home, honorably discharged, with medals and scars and a head full of noise. And for every one of those men, there's someone who didn't make it that far. Someone who bled out in the dirt. Someone the medic couldn't reach. Someone who only had time to whisper one last name before the world slipped away. Interesting fact, dog tags were designed for exactly that, identification in death. By the time of World War II, soldiers carried 2 tags. One stayed with the body, the other collected for record keeping. They were made of stainless steel and stamped with name, serial number, blood type, and religion. But sometimes there was no tag, no face, no recovery, and those men were simply gone. Names on lists, crosses without remains. Missing in action meant a family back home waited in agony for news that might never come. For those who survived, physical wounds were only part of the story. The mind carried its own injuries, memories that didn't heal, sounds that echoed forever. But the hospital, for all its pain and mess, was still a kind of sanctuary. There was food, there were blankets, there were people who spoke softly and didn't shoot at you. Sometimes that's all it takes to feel human again. Eventually, the orders come. You're cleared to leave. Whether that means a train back to a base or a ship back to the States, you don't know yet. You just know you're moving again, that someone else will take your cot, that the medic will rush back into battle tomorrow. And as you limp or roll or walk toward the next step in your journey, you look back. Not with nostalgia, never that, but with a strange kind of reverence. For the ones who worked through exhaustion to keep you alive, for the hands that held gauze and hope, for the moments that held everything together with nothing but string and stubbornness. The wound might close, the scar might fade, but that hospital tent, with its flapping sides and tin basins, stays with you, not just as a place where you didn't die, but as the first place you truly realized you were still alive. And now, let's come home. Or at least imagine it. Let's not pretend you would have made it far. Maybe you'd have survived the bus ride to boot camp. Maybe. But the second someone shouted, "Drop and give me 20 before breakfast," you'd start bargaining with whatever higher power controls coffee. You wouldn't last 5 minutes in standard issue boots. You'd look at them, realize they don't come with memory foam insoles, and ask if there was an option to upgrade. There isn't. Your blister would have a blister before your first march was halfway done. You'd look at the barracks and ask where the Wi-Fi is. You'd be horrified when the showers were communal and cold. You'd try to sleep on the cot but complain about the smell, the noise, and the fact that someone from Idaho won't stop snoring like an angry moose. And yet somehow, they did it. Not because they were superhuman, not because they wanted to, but because they had to. They got through it, all of it. The early mornings, the forced marches, the yelling sergeants, the mud-soaked socks, the letters that never came, the sea rations that haunted their stomachs for years afterward. They packed their gear, carried their rifles, swallowed their fear, and marched into history. You wouldn't have made it through one night watch, eyes straining in the dark, every rustling branch turning into imagined danger. You'd beg to go home. They didn't get to beg. They just stood watch, every 2 hours, shivering, alert, bone-tired, but committed. They made it through the boredom. That's right, not just the battles, but the mind-numbing tedium. Days on end spent cleaning rifles, scrubbing latrines, playing the same 3-card games over and over, wondering if the war would ever end or just fade into routine. They endured foxholes, frostbite, and field promotions that came with more responsibility and 0 extra blankets. They built friendships over shared cigarettes and arguments over baseball. They teased, they fought, they laughed, because sometimes laughter is all you have. They made it through the fear. The real kind, the gut-deep, hands-shaking, world-ending terror when shells explode too close, when someone yells incoming, when you're pinned down and the world sounds like a freight train made of fire and steel. You wouldn't have made it through 1 second of that. They did. Not all of them came back. That's true. Many didn't. But even the ones who did, the lucky ones, carried something with them the rest of their lives. A sound, a scar, a face they couldn't forget. They didn't come home and talk about it at barbecues. Most stayed quiet. Not because they were hiding anything, but because how do you explain a war to someone who's never been in one? Interesting fact. The US Army during World War II swelled to over 8 million men and women. That's 8 million people who were issued uniforms, trained, deployed, and asked to survive under conditions that most civilians couldn't imagine. 8 million human stories, many of them never told. You wouldn't last in those uniforms, by the way. Too scratchy. You'd try to wash them, only to find out you have to share 1 bar of soap with 7 other people. You'd probably cry when you learned you had to iron your shirt with a heated rock. And don't even get started on the helmets. Heavy, sweaty, and completely incompatible with your favorite hairstyle. But they wore them. Every day. In summer heat and winter sleet. Over beaches, through forests, across mountains. They wore them to protect the head while carrying the weight of fear, duty, and the names of their buddies. You wouldn't last on the rations. Not 1 can of ham and lima beans, affectionately known as ham and moans. You'd sniff the can and declare war on whoever made it. They ate it quietly, grumbled, sure, but they ate. Because food is food when the alternative is nothing. And don't even get started on the latrines. Just don't. You wouldn't last 5 seconds. They did. They used trench toilets. They dug holes. They learned to aim while crouching in the dark next to someone who once studied engineering but was now holding a roll of paper and contemplating life. You wouldn't last, and it's okay. You don't have to, because they did. They weren't perfect. Some made mistakes, big ones. Some were scared. Some were angry. Some were just tired of it all. But they got up every morning and followed orders. They crossed oceans, fought through hedgerows, liberated cities, and made sure that freedom wasn't just a slogan. Interesting fact, of all US troops who served in World War II, over 400,000 died, but over 16 million served in total. That's 1 in every 10 Americans at the time. Fighting, building, cooking, repairing, nursing, flying, and doing every job in between. Some came back and became teachers, or farmers, or fathers. Some never talked about it again. Others wrote books. Others just sat quietly and watched fireworks every 4th of July with a faraway look in their eyes. They were never looking at the fireworks, so no, you wouldn't last. But you don't need to, because they already did. They lasted so others wouldn't have to. They carried the weight so it wouldn't be yours. They marched so someone else could rest. And now, so do you. Let your mind settle. Let the helmet rest, scuffed and dented and earned. Let the boots come off. They're heavy, soaked, and smell faintly of trench mud. Let the fire die down and the radio fall silent. Let the noise fade, because you're warm now, you're safe. The stars above no longer mean navigation, they mean peace. The foxhole is now just a soft bed. The wind doesn't whisper danger, it carries calm. The world can rest because you are resting. So sleep, not like a soldier, but because of them. Let the war fade, let the stories be remembered, and let sleep take you gently as the past finally lays down its arms.